I think it's going to be pretty interesting talking about Chaos, what I want for Battlescroll, because I think there's a lot of room for Chaos to change. Um, and I think their balance is like weird, and there's a lot more stuff to fix. You can be a little more dramatic with it. There's a lot like worse internal balance going on with Chaos right now, so I think this video should be pretty engaging. I might have some hot as hell takes, so be ready for that. Um, I'm pretty much just going to get started right now. So, if you were tuned in yesterday or you're familiar with this, I'm basically going over wish lists for what I'd like to see in the battle scroll. This is not things I necessarily expect. This is sort of what I would do if I had the choice in what is going on here. Um, Go trigger Matt Rose. Yeah, I mean, like, actually, he's been doing a pretty darn good job. Everything keeps getting better and better, but there's a lot of stuff that I think could do with like a little bit more willingness to change some rules, just wordings on things. I think there's some limitations that really could be removed. They're overly safe, and a lot of people have been experiencing stuff with these new books that are like they're pretty scary, but they're also really fun and really engaging. And some of them I do think need some nerfs, but like I don't think that's the only part of this. I think a lot of other stuff needs to have some of its limitations removed and some of this interesting gameplay added. So I try to do some of that in some of these, which you'll see, and I think it'll make for a more interesting meta than just hammering down the top and dropping some points on the low stuff. So I try to go for more of that. Some stuff is also very new. Like in my order view, I didn't even cover Lumineth because it's really just hard to assess. I actually think they're mostly fine, barring like two models. But I do actually go over Nurgle in this, because I do think Nurgle's had enough games now where you can kind of get a good sense of it. And also, it's kind of like a simpler army in many ways, where it's easier to assess if it's too powerful, or people just need to adapt, etc. But I have a lot of thoughts, so I'm going to just kind of jump in right here. Actually, one more thing, yeah. I tend to prioritize internal balance over external balance, but they're both very important. I like books to be where more and more things inside the book are viable and interesting, and ideally, every option is about as good as any other option. It's just depending on how you like to play and the units you like. That's kind of my goal in a lot of these. I also want to make a lot of games more exciting and more builds interesting and compelling. There's some stuff that may be a little bit on the strong end, but I have no interest in tuning it down. Because it's only a little bit on the strong end and it's very fun. And I think fun is the number one priority. Competitive balance is the second, close behind it, priority. And I think internal balance is more important for that than external balance is. Anyway, I'm gonna jump into it and get started with my first an overview of where the game's at. So if you see here, like Matt and Nurgle's at a 59% win rate, that is post battle scroll. If you actually go to being within the last 2 weeks, it's at like a 65% win rate. Pretty egregious. Which we all knew is the book, I think, is like actually very well written. Some of the points are just a problem. So we're gonna get into that. But a lot of the other Chaos armies, they're kind of all over the place. Like if you look at Hedonistic Slash is pretty low, but like certain builds are pretty high. There's a lot of issues like that. Slaves of Darkness is struggling. Like Chaos is kind of a weak spot. Hells of the Hashut is in a decent balance point, but it's very unpopular right now. For being a new army, it's kind of surprising, and I think it's because there's some dissatisfying things to aim to fix here. The Siege stats are not really including anything new. I do think Siege is a very strong army coming into this, but there's not really any stats yet, so it's hard to say on that. But we're gonna get started with here's some popularity stuff. If you're familiar with this, like it does show kind of what people are enjoying. Even though Slaves of Darkness is in the weak spot, people are generally kind of enjoying it, but you see a very harsh fall off in terms of like competitive play with it, unfortunately. Magic and I expect to jump up a little bit. They're really fun right now and they're really good, etc. But this is kind of just an overview. Disciples of Zinch is very, very low for how the army is, because it was not very fun to play as for a long time, and now it's a very fun army, so I expect to see that rise. We're going to start off with Blades of Corn. Now, Blades of Corn for a long time was kind of in this spot where like its lore did not match its rules. It was a weird control army that basically didn't let the opponent play and sucked in combat for some reason, despite being the blood god. It's just been kind of like didn't feel like Corn for a long time. They changed that and made it much better in combat, but then it lost some abilities, and like these abilities were basically incredibly powerful control abilities. And so like the points maybe got a little bit more efficient, but they need to get a lot more efficient. It's in some buffs now, it's starting to approach a pretty balanced state, but it's still not there yet. There are some builds that are working though, as we will get to right here. First of all, Closet Karanak, 62% is a low. It's a low sample size. 55 games is not a lot, so it's a little bit variable. I do think they're very, very strong though. Pre-game moves are just really good, but the stats below that are the ones that are more relevant. If you look, the Wrath of Khorne Bloodthirster, all the Bloodthirsters basically are at a positive win rate. That's because the ROA for them, the Regiment of the Army of Renown, is quite good. Not in like a sense of like broken. It's just like good in a fun way, and the win rate's kind of high, but they're also kind of easy to play. I'm not super worried about this kind of a 54%, 53% win rate when it's like an army that's pretty simple. It's like when Gargans is like a little bit above 50. You know what I mean? Like it's they're fine. And so I didn't go for any changes on them. But if you look also, a lot of the like more utility stuff, like Flesh Hounds, a lot of the Priests and Bloodstokers, stuff like that, are pretty low win rate. I don't necessarily think that that's because they're like bad units. I mean, some of them are a little bit, but I think it's just that like overall the builds that support them just don't get there. So like stuff like the Bloodstoker, I don't think is like that bad. His win rate's really low. I don't think he's that bad. I think it's more that like the armies you'd like to play him in aren't doing so great, if that makes sense. So here's some of my changes I'd like to see. The Deathbringer going down 10. It was stupid in the Army of Renown, and it kind of got a nerf when really the Army of Renown was just broken. I don't think it was ever really a problem. It's a kind of melee assassin unit that fights decently. That's a cool ability. It going down a little bit. It gives people some more incentive to play it. I'm not even sure it'd be great at 120, but it'd be interesting. And the Lord of Khorne on the Crusher, it's just like too many points. No one's playing it. It's not that great. It going down 20 points might make it see a little bit more play. I'm not even sure like it's particularly competitive at down 20 points, but it certainly is more interesting. It's just get a little bit more efficient, and like the Blood Crusher builds have a slightly positive win rate, but I think it's one of those things where it's like it's kind of easy to win 2.5 games with them and almost impossible to win 5. So them going down a little bit, I think actually is interesting. It makes them more of an option, and also I think makes them slightly more appealing in non-spam builds. Like one of him in like 6 Blood Crushers is like kind of an interesting thing, but they're like not efficient enough to do anything other than try and cheese your opponent with. So some of these changes with the Skull Crushers going down 10 and the Mighty Lord of Khorne on Skull Crusher going down 20 helps with some of these fairer builds. Mighty Lord of Khorne going down 20, he just doesn't do anything. I mean, like the Soggy one is like a really cool war scroll. This is actually referring to both of them. I think the base one and the Soggy one need to go down. Soggy one is a really cool war scroll. It's just 170 points for a squishy foot hero, and its utility is quite good, but it's not like 80 points of utility on top of his, or 90 points on top of his war scroll. You know what I mean? So him going down a little bit helps these fairer builds be more efficient. And I think you want to play him. Like, he's really, really good. He's just a lot of points. So the 20 points I think will change a lot. Slaughter Priest is kind of similar, just slightly inefficient. And you start with Khorne, like, I think as you get more models on the table, the battle traits start to get stronger. So these points drops really infuse the battle trait quite a bit. Because being able to fit 1 or 2 more units in an army means that you're going to score more blood tithe over the course of a game quicker, and you're going to be able to play these like brawly matches and still have models left. Closet Karanak going up 20 I think is fine, because like it's really just discouraging you from doing stuff like playing like 3 of them or 4 of them and just clogging up the table. 1 unit of them is totally fine at that, with other things going down. Skull Reapers going down 10. I think Skull Reapers are like really cool, but they also die to anything. So, you know, them going down 10 to 170 per 5. Like they hit really hard, but like no one's really playing them. because they're just a little bit overcost. They're one of those units that people constantly go like, it like almost made the cut, and then barely got selected out. So I think the 10-point drop matters. I think Flesh Hounds could go down 10. They're 100 right now. They could easily be 90 with no problems. They could almost be 80, but not quite. So like I think 90 is a good middle ground for that. And with some of these like other changes, you can just have police fair games are slightly cheaper, and then Skull Cannon going down 30. Right now it's 150. If you look at like the cannons in cities, for example, they were 100, now they're 110. They have really good buffs and synergies with it. The playstyle leans towards them, and they're totally fine at 110. Skull Cannon does not hit as hard, and has way less utility within the army, way less support for it. Doesn't play necessarily exactly the way that the army wants to play that easily, but it's kind of a cool unit, and I would like to see it on the field more. I don't think it'd be a problem at 120. I think it'd be interesting. Spamming them would like be annoying, but then also they die pretty easy, and like they don't hit that hard, and someone just hides in terrain. You're like, well, guess I lose. And I think that they're an interesting way to help the army get some early blood tithe from the opponent's side rather than just sacrificing units. If you have a couple skull cannons, you can start like shooting things down and getting buffs without having to lose a unit every time. And I think that might plug some holes in Khorne's current issues. If you can just like kill a unit or two without also dying yourself, you can use your buffs more efficiently, I think. And that, I think, would be a nice incentive for some of these people trying to play more fair, rounded Khorne lists. I think it'd be fun for people. There's some stuff that I kind of considered. Like, I considered dropping Blood Warriors down by 10, but I'm not sure on that one. This maybe. Like, they're pretty decent still. They feel a little bit underwhelming, but not like... But 10 points down, and they start becoming like a little bit too good. So there might be just one of those lines. Maybe the Slaughter Priest and such going down in points kind of helps them fit more easily into lists. But that's kind of where I stand with Khorne. I think this would not really change their overall win rate that much, but it would close the gap between the Bloodthirster lists and everybody else. And I don't think that Khorne's in a terrible spot, but it feels like ever so slightly underwhelming, and I think these kind of help with that without really risking becoming a problem. Moving on to Tzeentch. Now, Tzeentch just came out. There's some changes that I put in here. I think Tzeentch is very, very strong. Problematically strong, but it's really, really fun and interesting, and I think a lot of its strength is most of its strength I think is kind of fine. Like, it's really annoying, but like it should be. It's Tzeentch. And it's kind of got decent internal balance, and there's a lot of loopholes for a lot of things, like where you can like counterplay if you did it right, but there's like certain wording issues that I think need to be fixed, which I'll go into in a second here. And there's a couple war scrolls I think are problems that are kind of making things, because they just need to be FAQ'd, errated, etc. I think with those changes we can get a better sense. I'd kind of rather sit and wait with it, even though I do think it's really, really, really strong. Fixing some of the interactions and then seeing where it lands after that, I think, is the way to go. So right now, the stats don't really include its new stuff, really, so it's kind of not reflective of anything. This, though, on these stats here, I did put it to the last 2 weeks. There's like not really any GT results for it, so I included RTTs. This is like not necessarily 100% accurate. It's small data points with RTTs included, but it's somewhat reflective of, I think, what a lot of people are experiencing. But there's some stuff that's like not even on there. The Lord of Change at that high of a win rate feels wrong. I mean, he is good, but I don't think it's that good. Like, it's small sample sizes and RTTs and stuff like that. So like a bunch of people going 2-1 makes it do that. I do think that like they are a little bit too good, but I think it's more rules interactions that are the problem here, as opposed to these units. The actual units that are a problem, I don't think are super well reflected here. So the stats are not super useful here, at least in my experience and talking to people who play Zinch. So here's kind of what I would change. The Silver Summoner trait that lets you bring back a mortal unit that's not Zangor's. I think it just be once per game. Like every other army that has that type of effect, it's once per game. Right now, there's some certain abusive lines, like where you bring the Thaumaturge and you kill him and bring him and kill him, and then you send other units. They keep coming back, and you have too many units, and it's kind of like it feels like this isn't Zinch. Feels like a death army. But bringing back one would be totally fine, and still quite good. I don't want it to be bad. It just needs to not be whenever you feel like it. Basically, you shouldn't be able to do it like 4 times in a game. It's too many free points. The Tome of Eyes has like a wording of where it's placed, where it has a combat profile, but you can place it in combat with people. Most players are already playing it as if you can't do that, but technically you can. And we expect it to be fixed, but I think it needs to be fixed, because if they don't fix it, then we have a major problem on our hands. Soggy Kyrics. They are very much a problem in this new book. They were fine before, but then they got access to significantly better buffs. But also, more importantly, they got access to the ability to very reliably get into people, hit them first, and then not get punished for it. Like previously, the problem was they were very squishy, but the squishy doesn't really matter if you can swap them out for a spawn during your opponent's turn. So you go kill something and swap them back into the sky. Kill something, swap them back in the sky, and they hit very hard. And at the current point cost, it just feels unreasonable. They do have downsides and weaknesses, of course, but they're just way too efficient. So it's like if you do catch him out or whatever, it's like, yeah, I finally got him. And it's like, and that was a 220 point unit that already killed like 600 points of guys. And they're going to bring it back with the Silver Summoner thing. And like, so it's kind of like this interaction's really annoying. It's an interesting unit. It's just too efficient, and then the replacement is too easy. Thaumaturge is kind of similar in that regard. Awesome rules, really cool model, a little bit too efficient, but with these couple points changes and Silver Summoner change, they become less abusive and become just more interesting, high damage pieces with cool utility that I think are more fun and still strong. I think they'd still be quite good at these points values. Probably a significantly positive win rate, but I'd rather be a little bit cautious, fix the broken pieces first, and see where it goes from there. There's some interactions with the teleporting in and out that I'm not exactly sure how to fix the wording on them, but there's certain like exceptions that don't necessarily apply as broadly as they should. Like you can't teleport in and out in the same turn, but you can do certain other teleport interactions multiple times in the turn, and it kind of becomes like that feels wrong. And there's like certain loopholes that really shouldn't exist. So closing up some of those loopholes, I think, would prevent some of the more abusive cases of Zinch while still letting them do really cool stuff. Chaos spawns are too cheap at 60. There's like no other unit in the game that costs 60. People bringing multiple of them, and they're like, oh, it's a tax. It's like, yeah, but you shouldn't be able to, like, for free bring 2 in the sky that are on the field just to do that. And, like, they're still a unit, you know? And yeah, they're not good at fighting, but they have really good utility. It's kind of like Hobrat Vandals are kind of this way. And 70, I think, is totally fair. Jade Obelisk, I think, are really cool, and they're really good. And I actually don't think there's necessarily a problem right now. Maybe they go plus 10. But what I would like to see, and this is more of an overarching thing, is some of these units that started in Warcry, but are very clearly units, not just like a specialist named thing. I would like to see them be able to be reinforced, because they're just like units now, right? They got rid of most of the Warcry stuff, so why can't we reinforce them? And I think it'd be an interesting unit if you could reinforce them, but they could be problematic at their current point cost. So I think this is like a kind of a side grade as opposed to being a buff or nerf. Like our unit of 20, or not 20, I think there's like 8 in a unit, or 9. But a larger unit makes their ability stronger, but you're investing more into it. And it's kind of interesting. And this has less to do with Jade Obelisk's balance and more to do with a general thing going on in the game right now that I'd like to see fixed. So these are like my thoughts on Zinch. It's kind of early to know. There's not a lot of stats, and I think they're a really fun army. I think they're kind of crazy strong, but they're fun. Moving on to Slaanesh. Now, Slaanesh is an army I play, so of course I'm going to have hell opinions on it. And I know a lot of people, especially people in the chat and stuff, also play Slaanesh, or at least are quite familiar with it. And you may have noticed in general that Slaanesh basically has one build, and that's kind of the problem. Yeah, this is what I want to look at. So, it's Invaders. Invaders is carrying the army on its back. If you look at this percentage, it's like crazy. That people only pick that, and a lot of that has to do with, like, a lot of sub-factions do nothing at all. They're basically blank text. There's too many things that, like, keyword bingo, or they don't actually work, and you're like, this would be cool, and it's like, yeah, but we're not gonna let you do it. Why? Because screw you, I guess. There's a lot of issues like that. So I really wanted to, like, increase diversity. So this Invaders build is the most popular, and it still doesn't even have a 50% win rate. It's below that. It's at like 48 or something like that. I was looking at the stats earlier. But it's the only way to play them. And, like, if it goes away, the army will cease to function. However, it's clearly too good. So, here's how I adjusted for it. Invaders up 40 points. And I think this might actually still not be enough, because that's how big the gap is. I think Invaders could be like a 60, 70 point sub-faction even. It's +1 Ren basically on your entire army most of the time. That's really strong. But for this, 40 I think is a good starting point. It puts it to a 50 point sub-faction, where now it's only 10 points. However, there's a lot of compensatory buffs. So that way you're not, like, reliant on this one sub-faction. Your units can be played in other sub-factions. You're not locked into one way of building, and you don't have to balance everything around as if it always had +1 red. Secondly, the pendant. I don't know why it costs points. It's mid. It's okay. Like, you could sometimes heal D3 on a hero. Sure. It shouldn't cost points. It was just has cost points because it was popular, because it was the only option that did anything for a while, and the rest just did nothing for the units you wanted to put it on. But that was, like, right at the beginning of the edition, and then, like, it's not really even seen in. It's not even that good. Like, it's fine. So some of the other changes I want to see, it just to help with, like, some diversity. Epicurean Revelers is removing non-hero. I don't know why there's a hero restriction on it. It's like, when you rally, you can use an extra 3 rally dice. Like, why can't that be on heroes? It still wouldn't even be playable. Like, this would still be garbage tier, but at least it doesn't have a pointless. Like, it's 3 rally dice. It's super low impact. I don't know why they felt that was going to be a problem if you could, like, rally a keeper, because keepers aren't even scary. And only being able to really rally demonettes and fiends is, like, not interesting. Pretenders is one of those ones that's really cool thematically, but in actual gameplay is not. For one, like, the heroic traits, and, like, there's a huge disparity in quality between them in many ways, and some of the ones that are good are, like, pretty good, but the ones that aren't are, like, useless. The artifacts are really good. I'd much rather have a second artifact. And you have to put on a unit that already has an artifact, and it's kind of annoying because, like, the whole theme of it is you have this one figurehead, and you get an extra heroic trait, but you can't put 2 heroic traits on the same unit. So the entire, like, gameplay story just doesn't function. That's why you don't see it, because you're like, oh, that's cool, and then you try and do it, and you realize that, and then the judge will tell you, no, you can't do that, actually. And you're like, oh, well, it wasn't even going to be particularly good. It was going to be fine. Did not need to have that limitation. So if you remove that, you specifically word that you can, I think that would be really interesting and fun, without even being close to a risk of being a problem. Next, I would remove the companion keyword from Glutos and Fiends. All the stuff in Glutos' model is sentient stuff. Like, it's not just animals. These are, like, people. I don't know why they all have a companion keyword. Let it be buffed. and with invaders going up in points, he would get worse in many ways, but like removing companions a pretty big buff. So I think this would help. Fiends, same deal. They're demons. They're not animals. Like they're like they shouldn't have companion. It just doesn't really make sense. They're intelligent demons. So it let them be buffed by stuff, like, but then also they are quite good and they're the highest win rate unit in the army. But it's more of like a frustration thing where like your army doesn't work with itself. So I'd rather them be more expensive but actually be able to use the buffs, because your army has all these like cool buffs and you just can't use them on most of your units, and it's very annoying. Inferno Raptress is another one where it's like more of a quality of life change. She doesn't see any play. Her ability's great, except for that its range is 18 for some reason. And like, if you're just bringing a unit whose only job is to unbind, but doesn't unbind as well as like a level 1 wizard, doesn't even have an unbind, and then the range is 18, that doesn't make any sense. But if it's range 30, they harass all the wizards in the table until they deal with them. And you play with normal unbind ranges in terms of like how you think about things. And I think this would help a lot. I think it'd make it a pretty interesting unit to bring, without being at any risk of being a problem. Like, unless you're playing like a magic spam army, like versus Zinch, yeah, sure, it's quite good, but then they just have to be mindful of it and kill your like 5 wound, 5 up save hero. Otherwise, you're going to keep taking damage, and I don't think that's asking too much. The mask going down 20 points, like, she sees no play. She was really, really good before, but the way that, like, for one, counter charges make her a lot worse. Secondly, the way that battle tactics are, etc., she just doesn't really do anything right now. But she has a kind of a cool war scroll, but she's just inefficient at like 130 points. If she was 110, she starts being much more interesting little assassination piece. And she's unique, so you can't like spam her, so it's not like you can like bring like 10 of her and save a bunch of points. It's just 20 points. So I think it'd be interesting to see her like that. Shalaxi is another one with a great war scroll. Too many points. 450 is too much. Like, she is significantly more expensive than, say, Scarbrand. And while she is good, she's not 450 points. She's very fragile. She hits pretty hard, but like, so do most things in that range. Her utility is quite good, but the once per game fight twice, but like, it's not to the point. Like, she's too many points. Like, dropping her 30 points, she would not be a problem. Her win rate right now is like 38% or something like that. Bringing her close to like 45 would be nice. And with some of these changes, you could do cool stuff, like maybe make fiends reinforced, and you could put some buffs on them, and then like send them in and double fight, and it'd be kind of interesting, but they're less efficient. So like, you can't just like spam stuff. I think it'd be kind of cool. Lord of Pain is too good. It just is. Like, 120 points for an AoE plus 1 to wound is like, it's in every single list for a reason. It has been like the whole time. Demonettes going down 10, I think would open up a lot of builds. Demonettes are like a little bit too inefficient right now, and they are seeing play in some builds, but it is in this way that feels kind of like they're kind of being carried by these like Twin Souls builds that are working a little too well, where like everything's a threat. And if Invader's a little bit more expensive, like, Demonettes like don't see play as like a Demonette army. They see play in Invaders as like sometimes people bring like 20 or 40 of them, and it makes the points kind of work out. With Invaders going up, that would no longer be a thing, I don't think. So Demonettes going down, I think, would be interesting. Painbringer's win rate right now is kind of decent, but I think it's not because of the Painbringers. People bring like a unit of Painbringers because they make things fit slightly better. But they suck. Like, I'm not even sure they're good at 100. And they started off at like 140. Now they're down to 110. At 100, I think they're like okay, but like, if you think of it like Blood Warriors and Chaos Warriors are 190 for 10. These guys at this would be 200 for 10, and a 20-man unit like this is a lot better than a 10-man unit, and you can't do that with them. Like, I think they'd actually be fine at 90, but this is at least another step in the right direction where they start becoming like at least a somewhat attractive option. Lastly, I think Fiendbloods are too good, and I am a Slaanesh player, and I'm like, this unit is like carrying the rest of my army on its back. It's so powerful, especially in invaders. Some of these changes I think would help rebalance the army in a way. It might actually make it worse for a bit, but it would help move it towards a place where it's like functioning more as it should, as opposed to being completely carried on the back of the invaders. When invaders rotates, a lot of other things can drop more, in my opinion. But like having Rend 3 on Twin Souls is like silly. Like they clearly should not have Rend 3. And then they do for like without you having to do anything, and like that's a problem. It's kind of hard one to fix right now. But once invaders rotates, you can do more changes with that. So that's where I stand with Slaanesh. I think this would actually, fun enough, hurt their win rate, but improve the gameplay experience a lot for them. Next, we got Hellsmiths of Hashit, the Hashitters. I love Hellsmiths. I think they're really cool. But they're not popular right now, even though they're brand new and their models are amazing, and people like them thematically, and I have some theories as to that. For one, they came out a little bit on the weak side, but more importantly, a lot of their rules, like their sub-factions, are like way over safe. Like, everything's balanced as if you always have 3 demonic power points on it, which I do kind of think makes sense in some ways, but it's to the point where, like, even if you did, it's not good. Like, so I'm just going to move forward a little on this real quick. So the win rate right now is right in the middle. Like, it's fine, 49.8, but it's at a mid win rate in the sense that everyone goes like 2-3, 3-2. Not in the sense that like they have a good chance of going 5-0. So they're kind of a bad version of a 50-50 army right now. If you look at some of these win rates, I don't think these are necessarily super reflective of things so much. Like, I think people just all build the same stuff because it's like everything else feels weird and wrong. But if you look, like, a lot of these people bring a lot of, like, Infernal Razors, not good. I think they're actually worse than these stats show, because, like, you're not going 5-0 with this army. As the classic army, you can as like the Army of Renown, which is funny. Like a lot, but that's because like the sub factions don't work the way they clearly should. There's a lot of interactions that don't work. So here's what I would do. I would change the Hashitite host, which is the one that lets you rally 3 additional dice if someone has 3 DPP. Garbage. Like, that's a non-ability. Oh, if you put 3 buffs on this infantry unit, you can, when you rally, you can get 3 extra rally dice. You might heal 1.5 if you spend a CP, on average. And, like, that's terrible. It should be adding 3 rally dice per demonic power point on your infantry units when you rally. It's only when you rally. It's like you're healing, you're rolling this every turn. It's like 1 unit for a CP when they're not in combat can sometimes rally more. And if this becomes much more interesting, because now you can like spread demonic power points around a little bit, but if you have 3 on a unit and they're injured, you can roll an additional 9 rally dice, so that's 15 rally dice, and bring back like 7-8 models, and that becomes kind of an interesting sub-faction. It still would not be particularly scary in a competitive sense, but it becomes fun. It becomes interesting. It has cool gameplay implications, like retreating out of fights with the soggy guy, and then rallying up and using 9 additional dice for that, and like suddenly your unit's back up to full, and you got ward saves, and you're being real annoying, without necessarily being a problem. Because there's a lot of interactions and gameplay there, and a lot of counterplay for both players. And like if you're putting 3 demonic power points on your melee infantry units, that's a weird spot to be in, and you're not putting them on other units. There's a huge cost benefit with Hellsmiths, and I don't think that like the sub factions and some of the rules really take into effect the fact that you're not putting it on your threats when you're doing this. So you're paying a meaningful cost to have access to this ability, but now it feels more worth it. Like, I would probably try it out if it was like that. Similarly, Castigation Battery, it's got a really low win rate, actually. That's the one that gets +1 shot if you have 3 DPP. It should be if you have at least 2 DPP. You shouldn't have to always have 3 for your sub-faction to exist. I think that's part of the design problem. If it's at least 2, then you could like get it across more units, and you could kind of play with that more, and you could. It's better, just being more vaguely useful on like the minotaurs and stuff to get just an extra shot here and there when you're powering things up. Like it has more impact. When you have like 6, you can get 3 units of an extra shot as opposed to just 2. It's only artillery. It's only your war machines. Like it's not even, you can't even put it on like your infantry or anything like that. So I think this would be fine, and create more interesting gameplay. Bullfather's Horns is currently +2 movement. If you have 3 DPP, I think it should be +1 move per DPP. So that means if you have 1 on a unit, it's just +1 move, which lets you basically be more flexible with it, affect more units. And also it's stronger when you do use it. 3 on 1. It's 3 instead of 2 inches extra movement. And I don't think that'd be a problem at all. Like you're putting all your power into this one unit, and it's getting, your sub faction is one of your units gets +3 movement. Like, I think that's kind of fine. In fact, and then like, but then it's interesting because then you can have like, you can put it spread out more, and all these units have like +1, +2 movement, and you can do like more interesting tools here, and it just it helps list diversity a lot, and I think would be very exciting without being a risk a problem. Lastly, this one I think is kind of cool. Demon Smith Cabal is, if you have 3 DPP, you get +1 to cast and unbind. I think it's. Oh, I didn't finish typing. It should just been. This should be per DPP. You get +1, but only to cast, not to unbind. Like it's just you cast spells really strong, which is very like thematic for them, and you're putting all your demonic power points on these small heroes or your demon smiths on bowls, but like it's fine. You're casting your spells more reliably in exchange for putting all your demonic power points on them. So you're hard to unbind, and you're more reliable with casting, but like you're not locking the opponent down. I didn't word this properly in typing. It should say just to casting. And I think this would really create a lot more exciting gameplay and list building options, and really fill the gameplay fantasy of Hellsmiths without really being at any risk of problems. It would also like I think create opportunities for like 5-0 type plays, as opposed to this constantly like, you can kind of win some games, but like it always feels like you're on the back foot, at least at the high level. So I think that'd be interesting. Then there's some units that need some significant help. The Blade cohort is so bad. Going from 100 to 80 points, at least they have a roll. I wish they had Rend 1 base. I wish that they had a better ability, but they don't. So this at least helps. The Soggy Blades have an interesting ability, but it doesn't make any sense to replace models in their unit when they cost as much as the units you're replacing, and when they're kind of inefficient, and they already suck at combat. Like, I'd almost say they should go down 20, because then they become an interesting tool in your arsenal, where you're taking this cheaper unit and replacing more expensive models with their models. And you can do some kind of cool stuff with that. But it feels weird, like, why would I spend 100 points in a unit to replace models when the unit that's replacing also costs 100 points? You know what I mean? Like, it just doesn't make sense. But I think they should probably make it, like, even down 20. I think both the Razor units need to go down 10. I'd almost say that the Flamethrower should be 80 points per 5. I think they actually might be fine at 80 points per 5. Which people might be like, oh, wow, that's too cheap for a shooting unit. It's like, it's 5 models on a 4-up save with 1 wound that moves 4 inches. Like, it dies to anything. It's slow. It's got short range. It's cool. And it does hit kind of hard, but there's so much counterplay. Like, if someone spams them, like, they're going to lose. They're Rend 0 base. Like, it's their abilities once per turn army, so it's not like spamming them really pays off. But there are now no one brings the flamethrowers, even though I like the war scroll on them. They don't make sense at 100 points. And I think the blunderbusses are also actively bad. I think they suck. And people play them and they shouldn't be. At 110 points for 5 models with 4-up save that move 4 inches with 1 wound and 1 shot apiece, like, it just doesn't make any sense. At 100 points, they become more interesting, and at 90 points, they become good. I think they are the opposite of a crutch. I think people think they're a crutch, that they're actually just tripping them up and making them fall on their face, and they are really quite bad, and they need to go down in points. And they're one of the reasons why people feel frustrated, because they have this unit that dies to like anything that costs too many points, and they're treated as their main threat. And then it has to have demonic power points on it all the time, which goes back to this whole issue of like these. They undervalued, I think, how much of a restriction needing to stack demonic power points on something is. So I think these changes would make Hellsmiths way more exciting. It gives them a lot more possibilities to 5-0. And I think people would really like these, and I don't think it'd be a problem. I think at most they'd be like a 51% win rate after these changes, but people would be way more excited to play them. Next we have Magnet and Nurgle. So Magnet and Nurgle just came out. They're very, very strong. They're a problem for sure. They're also kind of an army that's somewhat simple to understand what's going on. So I feel more confident in assessing their power level and how to kind of make some changes here. But if you look at their stats here, this is pretty crazy. And I think is reflective of the power level. There's technically one unit that has a sub 50% win rate here. Everything else is like solidly over 50, many of it in the 60s. However, I think part of the thing about Nurgle is it basically just feels like they have one unit too many units. I don't actually think it's that oppressive. It's just that like a lot of the weaknesses are shored up because they just have an extra unit floating around. So you're like, oh, they're super slow. It's like, yeah, but they also have so many units on the table that they can just fill the table anyway, when they really shouldn't be able to. Like, most of these armies would be totally fine if they had cut one unit of pox wretches, because then there'd be weaknesses. There'd be counterplay. Like, they'd have to leave objectives open. There's ways you can slide in when they don't expect it, etc. But because they're so cheap, they can cover up that weakness for free while still playing everything else they want to play. And that's the problem with them. There's also significant internal balance issues, in my opinion. And I think some of these units have high win rates, but it's not necessarily that unit's fault so much as this overarching problem of everything's too cheap. Like, I don't think, for example, the Harbinger of Decay is a problem. It's mostly that's just in lists that are running a bunch of overly efficient units, and then it's like benefiting from that as opposed to it being over efficient. So, here's some changes of what I did. So Belga plus 20, I know people will find me on this one. Her ability is incredible, and I think it makes a bunch of other stuff a little too good. She's also like 7 wounds and a priest with a decent prayer, but a really good prayer lore. She's tanky. She's just really good, and I don't think she'd be overpriced at 140. I could see 130 for her, but I would probably go with 140. Cankerborn I actually think are good, but apparently I'm the only person who thinks Cankerborn are good. So, drop them out my town, I guess. But I think they're good already at 200. Festus, people don't play him because he's overcosted. His War Scroll is awesome. It's really cool. It's really fun. Compared to the rest of the army, he's just too many points. I actually think he's totally fine at 300, maybe 280 at the lowest. The problem is that everything else is like really, really, really efficient, so it feels crazy to bring him because everything else is insanely undercosted, right? So at 300, I think it's interesting with everything else changing. He might need another points drop after that, but it'd make him closer with other things changing as well. Ridiculous Slimix, I'd actually probably make him plus 30, but plus 20 is a good starting point. He's like 140 right now, which is criminally cheap. Like, he summons a tree, he recurs beasts, he's quite tanky. The trees are very good. You can repeatedly summon a second tree. Bringing back beasts are really good. Beasts are really strong. At 160, I think he'd still be taken in a huge volume of list, not even just specialist lists, even though he's kind of a specialist unit. At 170, I think it's like kind of the line 160, 170, where he starts to be like only in specialist lists, but he'd still be very good at 170. So the fact that he's 140 is crazy to me. Lord of Plagues is also like, why the hell is this unit 100 points? His buffs are really strong. He's a solid fighter. He synergizes perfectly with the army, and for some reason the Lord of Blights is 140, who's very clearly worse, and is 40 points more, and it feels like their points got swapped somehow. These changes here make them at least both 130, which I think is much more reflective of what they're doing. Lord of Blights might need to drop another 10 after that, actually, in my opinion, but at least he's going down 10 here, and the army's win rate is crazy, so whatever. Foulhoof is undercosted, but not massively. It's the combination of him and Pestigors that is too expensive. Now, the Pestigors, this I was arguing myself with a lot. Is it plus 10 or is it plus 20 on them? I think there's a fair argument for just plus 10, but their win rate is like 63% right now. So it's kind of hard to say for sure on that. But I could be swayed to a plus 10. Some of these other changes as well. But I think it'd still be like a 57% win rate after these changes, if it's plus 10, which is still too high. You know what I mean? Like that's outside the band of acceptable win rates. Rot Swords are similar. Rot Swords are crazy. They hit way too hard for what they're supposed to be doing. They're impossible to kill. They're so much better than Chaos Warriors. It's kind of nuts because they're basically perfectly suited to the role they're trying to do. And while the War Scroll to War Scroll side by side may not be that much different, the way that Nurgle plays, they suit in so perfectly. And I think a unit of a 440 point unit for 20 of them, I'd take in a heartbeat. It just would feel more balanced at that point. And with the Lord of Plagues going up by 30, because he just should be, that package is expensive, but it holds the center like crazy well. I still think it'd be very good at these points changes, but I think it wouldn't feel quite as oppressive, and there'd be like ways around it. But yeah, that's what I would do with Nurgle right now. I think it's pretty easy to assess Nurgle's power level compared to other armies because it is fairly straightforward. So I think these changes would help. Moving on to Slaves to Darkness. Here's an army I also play and have some pretty strong opinions on. I think Slaves to Darkness is kind of in a weak spot, but it's also in a frustrating spot. I think there's a lot of gameplay fantasies that that just don't work out the way you'd like. I think they kind of pigeonhole you in many ways into ways to play that. It's just like there's a lot of stuff that's over safe, in my opinion. Let people do cool shit, and that cool shit shouldn't just be like 12 Baron Guard charging in, like that's kind of boring. But there's like a lot of stuff that's cool. I personally play Dark Elf, but I am quite familiar and do occasionally like plant TTS other builds and stuff like that. But also I talk to a lot of Slaves Darkness players, so these are, I think, fairly nuanced takes that I think people would very much enjoy. So I'm excited to show some of these. Right now the win rate's 45%, and they're a very easy to play army. So I think the win rate being that low is actually kind of a warning sign, because they're not hard, right? Like if this really hard army has a lower win rate, sometimes it's like, yeah, like people make a lot of mistakes, right? It pulls down the win rate. Slaves is pretty straightforward. There's not a lot of tools you have to pull yourself above its base win rate. So I'm trying to fix that. If you look at some of these, there's a pretty big discrepancy. A lot of these sub-factions don't really see a lot of play. And their win rate, I don't have it here, but their win rates are also significantly lower. People play Champions of Chaos. I think Champions of Chaos is very, very strong, but also it's like the only one that feels like it does what it's supposed to do. And that's the other reason people play. It's not just for power level. It's because it does its thing. And the other ones don't. Some of these units, they just don't really feel like their role. Like, Chosen at 41% win rate when they're so easy to play is like kind of crazy. There's some really egregious units like Fell Riders that are just like, why are they 150 points, right? Like, it's insane. So, first of all, removing once per turn army from Mark of Tzeentch. This one I think is going to be a contentious point. You should be able to teleport multiple units if you have multiple units that have Tzeentch Mark. I don't think it'd be a problem. They have to teleport outside of 9. You're giving up the other marks of combat buffs for this ability. I think there's some cool plays you could be doing with like teleporting them around the table as like moving your castle, being annoying with it. Yeah, you give one unit a 3d6 charge with the spell if it goes off, but like that's the current problem is you're super incentivized to basically turbocharge one unit, and this would create more complex gameplays and choices that generals could wield to feel like they have more agency in a game, and like get your Tzeentch-minded players like teleporting a unit of warriors and then this guy, and suddenly you're in a totally different position than where you were. Without it really, I don't think it'd be a problem, but I think it'd create really cool gameplay moments. Marcus Sinesh should not just be in your turn. They're worried about countercharge on it. Well, it should be good at that, like charging in nearby a Marcus Sinesh unit should be a mistake, if they and then spend 2 CP and they're still not guaranteed by any means. It's a bad 3d6. You take out the lowest dice. Why is it only during your turn? Like, that feels like they just don't want the army to have cool rules. And if you look at these new books, that would not be the case in a new book. So I think this is one of these opportunities to like raise up an army to kind of be at a more similar level to these newer books. And I think it'd create a lot of really cool fun interactions and skill differentiation. Dark Oath Horde should not be able to bring back Wilder Fiends. Every time you do it, people are like, "That, let me see that roll," because it clearly shouldn't. But also, it shouldn't be on a 3-up. You're bringing back like 40 points of models. You know what I mean? Like, just let me do it for free. I want to have guaranteed access to this rule, and you can at least balance around it. Because like, dice rolls on recursion, as we've seen a lot of changes of CP and stuff like that. Some armies do it for free. It depends on the power level of the units they're bringing back. A lot of time, Dark Oath Horde units are not a problem, so I think it could be free and guaranteed, but no Wilder Fiends. Legion of Chaos is +2 to control if you have a demon hero and a mortal hero on the table, and you're wholly outside of your zone on an objective. I think it should just issue +3 instead, and just outside of your zone, not wholly outside of your zone. It would be an interesting choice at that point. I think it'd see some play. It'd still be kind of fringe. It wouldn't be a powerhouse, but I think it'd be interesting. Secondly, to spoilers, removing once per turn army. Like, in whose mind was it going to be a problem to be able to chain activate demon princes into units? Like, it's not a problem. Like, if someone's bringing like 4 demon princes and 4 units with them, let them do it. Like, yeah, come on. Like, who thought this was going to be a problem? Abraxia -10, so she's actually a really, really low win rate, but I think some of these changes are really more the cause. And I think it's stuff like she's played with like Chosen and things like that, and the Chosen suck. So I don't think it's so much that she sucks as it is that like a lot of the stuff she's trying to support is in a really bad spot. Chosen going down 20, I don't think, like, 280 points is a lot for that unit. And people worried about Pokeball. It's not been even a mild threat for like a year and a half. It was good for like 3 months when people were just learning the edition, and then it's been bad ever since then. And yet it's at they've been suffering for the first 3 months when it wasn't even like a true problem. It was just that people were still learning the edition and making mistakes. So that dropping down 20, each unit would go down 40 units if you bring Chosen. You bring 20, you're saving 80 points there, and it would not be a problem. Furies -10, 120 is just too much. Let people play Furies. Savagers, remember I was talking earlier with the Tzeentch units, I think they should be able to be reinforced, but they would be a little bit too good at their current point cost if you reinforce them, so I think them going up a little bit in points, but being able to be reinforced adds some more diversity to the roster, gives you more tools to play with. Fell Riders dropping 20, I don't know if they'd even be good at that point, but at 130 versus 150, they become an interesting choice. And when you need some scoring units or a mobile threat in your Dark Oath army, it doesn't feel awful to bring them. They're not impressive, but they become probably about right. Maybe slightly on the weekend, but not to the degree where it's like, this sucks. Foam Rate Crusher down to 100 points. I want to smash stuff with my stupid model. He's not good. Let him be 100 points. Like, if someone spams them, they're terrible being spammed. Like, just let people play him. Sphere minus 10, I think it's just an interesting unit that doesn't quite fit in a lot of lists, but almost fits, and then you end up like 10 points over and stuff like that. But with Chosen going down and things like that, there's some interesting gameplay you can do here. I think these changes would really help Slaves of Darkness feel more exciting, a lot more list building opportunities. I think this would create a lot more in-game decisions as well, a lot more flexibility in the army, and just overall raise the power level to be closer to 50% from where it is right now. And I think this would make a lot of people really happy, and I don't think there'd be a lot of problematic interactions going on. I think it'd be doing exactly what the army wants to do. So, yeah. Lastly, we got the Skaven, or Shakavines, as I call them since I was a little kid. Skaven are a weird one. Their win rates are all over the place. If you look at this, like their actual win rate, where is it? It's, let me find them. 50.3%. So exactly even, right? They're well balanced. Nah, internal balance is dog shit in this army. Like, the things that are good are so much better than things that are worse. There's weird limitations everywhere. Like, you see, like, they have so many cool units, but you see kind of the same units being played in every army. And that's not because those units are necessarily super overpowered for the most part. It's basically because too many limitations, you know, and overly safe choices, etc. So I wanted to fix a little bit of this. Obviously, there's some egregious units that need some changes, like Plague Priest and Plague Furnace. That's a lot. That's a really high win rate, and that's not a small sample size. It's not a huge one, but 110 games with 67% win rate, that's a problem. And the Plague Monks are right up there with it, and I'm not super surprised. I think they're both overly efficient, especially the Plague Monks, though. I think the Plague Monks are the actual kind of root of the problem there, as opposed to the Plague Furnace, but it's also just like, it's really good in a way that I don't think people enjoy, which is like, look, I put 180 Plague Monks on the table. So them getting tuned down, I don't think will piss people off. But if you look like, I'm surprised the Grace here is so low. I don't know what that's about. 36% is wild to me, because it's like, yeah, that's just weird to me. Maybe it's just people getting too clever. I don't know. But here's what I would do. So Screech up 20. His win rate's really high. I actually was kind of surprised to see that. I didn't really think of him as a powerhouse. Thought he was pretty well balanced, like maybe slightly on the weekend, but I guess he's doing really well. I'm not sure he actually needs to change. That might be an anomaly, but it's kind of a high play rate, so Gracier in today's comments too. Yeah, I mean, he's not even that expensive is the weird thing. So I think my personal opinion on the Gracier is that he's played in armies that currently don't work well, as opposed to him being the problem, if that makes sense. So I have some changes here that I think might help. Plague Furnace up 30. It's just doing way too well. I was kind of surprised to see its win rate that high. I thought it'd be like a little bit above average. I was surprised to see it was that high. I do agree with. I do think Gracier should be 2 cast. I would love to see that change. He's like, yeah, I don't know why he's not a 2 cast wizard and more expensive. So the Corruptor, I think, is actually a really interesting war scroll, and he's just a little bit inefficient. So I think a 30-point drop on him would actually let him see some significant play. He has some really cool rolls, and you see some really cool stuff happening with that. He's just a little bit inefficient right now. So I think him dropping a 270 becomes a really cool situation, and you can do the plagues and like have a more thematic list that's not just spamming these Plague Monks. So I put the Plague Monks up 10, Plague Furnace up 30, Corruptor down 30. It should open up some options here. The Tyrant of Battle on the Warbringer currently lets him basically, you can do all attack up to 3 times or all defense up to 3 times, but it's not free. So it's worthless basically, because like I'm not spending 3 CP to get my clan rats plus 1 to save. You know what I mean? Like, and then we hold within 12 of him, and you're already bringing this giant hero to get access to this ability that's not doing anything. Like, you can do some cool stuff like Thankful with it, where you can like do, but like it's too cute, and he sees no play because of it. So I think if you change that to the second and third time it's free, it's like they're whole within 12 of him, and then he goes up like 10 points because he right now he sees no play at all. So as is, he probably have to drop like 30, 40 points. But if he's gaining a lot of power here, so I think he goes up points, but he's getting a huge buff. I think like suddenly he becomes a very interesting option, and these fair armies playing like Clan Rats and Storm Vermin and Verminous Tide stuff become a lot more interesting when his ability is, because this huge limitation. You're playing like 40-man squads sometimes. Staying in his aura is like a significant ask, so it better have an upside to it, right? So I think this would actually be meaningful. And Visit going down 20, again, making these fair armies have more of a reason to exist. You know, like the payoff's there. So like you're saving some points here. You're getting a really cool ability. Galvanier just too expensive. He's fine War Scroll wise. He's just too expensive. 140 is a lot. So the sub faction with Thanquol's Menagerie, there's some interactions with where you can basically get like 3 death triggers in a turn, and I think it's kind of a problem, not necessarily from a balance standpoint, more from a rules as intended perspective on that. I think they need to clean up some of those, and I'm not exactly sure what the best way to go about that is, because I'd have to like put them all side by side and change the exact wordings on it. I think the army's fine balance wise. It's just when you counter, you're like, that shouldn't work that way. You know what I mean? Like, it's just one of those things. Night Runner's minus 10. I don't know why the hell that unit is 120 points. It's crazy. Like the unit, it's cool. I would honestly argue for it to be 100 points. Right now it's 120. Going to 110. I don't know if I'd make it like 100 points. It'd probably be minus 20 on that. Let's be real. Like, it should be like minus 20 easily. And lastly, removing once per turn army from the Rattling Warp Blaster. So its ability to like basically turbocharge and possibly blow itself up, that shouldn't be once per turn army. Like if I want to turbocharge all my Rattling Warp Blasters and blow up half of them to like do a burst of damage, let me do it. That's fun. I it's totally fine if people could do that on multiple units. I don't think it'd be a problem. Like I think it'd be really fun and exciting, and their rate's quite low right now. But I think partially it's because of limitations like this. Like if you could run 3 Warp Blasters for 120 points apiece, and then all 3 of them get the Scryer buff, and all 3 of them you can turbocharge at the same time, it's kind of cool. And it might like really create some interesting gameplay dynamics and like really exciting moments. Oh, thank you, man. Yeah, I kind of agree with you that Clan Rats should be cheaper. I did bring them in line with Plague Monks, so now they're both 150. And I think the Warbringer Tyrant change makes them more interesting. Visit going down as well makes them more interesting. So I think those changes could make them more useful, but if that didn't work, I would agree that the Clan Rats should probably go down like 10. 130 becomes a problem, though. I'll tell you that. Like, as we saw when people were running like 180 or 200 Clan Rats, and just winning games because they had too many models. They don't want to open up too many spam lanes, but nice utility piles with a more efficient Physic and the Tyrant changes makes them fight better and have better stats for what they're doing. So if that didn't work, then I could see lowering them down by 10 for sure. But I think they're already pretty decent. So these are like, that's the last of the armies I want to change, but I think these would create a lot more interesting internal balance. I think you'd see a lot more excitement. So I think that these could go a long way towards improving the state of a lot of these armies, and make a really exciting end of this little season going into the next GHB, where like our armies are like a more even playing field, and we're like moving them more towards the direction of where the new books are. I think you can see a lot of improved gameplay experience here. Even like some of the changes that are kind of simpler, like the Corn changes, they make the battle trait work a lot better. So I think people will be much more excited to play with some of these changes being done. So yeah, that's my thoughts on Chaos. It's a lot less armies than Order, so I went a little more thorough in each of them. But Captain is taken. I mean, I kind of see that, but I actually don't mind spamming stuff in a way. I think it's kind of fun. However, I do think that perhaps auxiliary is a mistake. I think like people, if you want to spam a unit, oftentimes it has glaring weaknesses, and like the problem in 40k a lot of times is the shooting game for one, but two, like you could fit too many overall models, and so spam becomes a serious problem. I don't really mind people spam units. Yeah, like exactly, and like oftentimes spammy lists will be like hard countered by certain parts of the meta, and like you feel really good in the good games and really bad in other games. It's kind of self-balancing in Age of Sigmar. In 40k less so because it's a game of efficiency and like shooting, and so like if a dreadnought for example is too cheap and you bring 20 of them, there's not really any downside to doing that. In Age of Sigmar there very much is a downside to playing spam most of the time, unless it are there's certain exceptions to that rule, but I don't like rule of three personally. It just to me is kind of it's not a fun way to balance the game. It feels like it's saying no as opposed to making it so you're kind of it's not incentivized to do it. I think the current battle tactic structures also tend to make it not the greatest, as long as things don't get like egregiously undercosted. Yeah, let me know if you guys have any thoughts on like changes, etc. I'm going to be let me know in the comments if you think I missed, or if you think I'm wrong about something. Tomorrow I am going to be doing Destruction, which is my favorite sub-faction, or for Grand Alliance, so that'll be really fun. Probably right around noon-ish, I'll be live streaming it, and I will be posting things up and sharing links to the videos on my YouTube channel, War Glamour. So give it a follow, etc. That always is helpful, and I'm trying to make a little more content because it's fun for me to yap about stuff. So thanks for joining me on the stream, everybody. See y'all.